So what Gallup's theory is that if you get people engaged, once they're engaged, then they will grow in spiritual growth. It's not required that it happens that way, but on average it happens that way. Some people may be already very spiritually committed, and just that's all they want to do is pray and not be very engaged with the rest of the church, and that's fine. But most people, once you can get them engaged, then they become more spiritually committed, and that spiritual commitment drives the 4 outcomes, which Gallup defines as life satisfaction, inviting, serving, and giving. And that corresponds to the first, second, third, fourth question in that order. So overall, I'm extremely satisfied with the way things are in my personal life. And I think it's really great that we got 77% of people that agree or strongly agree with that. The neat thing is we got 17% of people that are neutral, and maybe we can help them become happier. And that's what Gallup has found over time, is that by implementing strengths program and working on the results from the ME25, you can increase the numbers on this, which to me is great. And then the next one, last month I invited someone to participate in my parish. And again, this is kind of a Northwest thing, that we're always lower than the average. The next 2, volunteer hours and how much do you give. These are percentages here of you know, how the people answered. And you can see we look pretty normal there, right? We have a little bit higher right here in the 3,000 to 5,000, 10% versus 7 and 8. But other than that, we're pretty close to the averages there. What Gallup says is, no, you need to work on getting them engaged. That'll lead to commitment, and then that will lead to outcome. So it's a process. You don't just say, hey, I want people to, you know, more people to work, to volunteer 5 hours a week, and start working on that. You have to first get them to feel like they belong to the church, and then they start become more spiritually committed, and then they'll start volunteering because they will realize, hey, that's a great thing to do. So now let's go on to page 5. So there's an error on this page. I'll tell you where it is in a minute, but some of you sharp people might figure it out before then. But, you know, number 1, just did you attend Mass? We're, you know, a little above there. I think, you know, 3% is probably a significant difference. And then, but here's where it's really neat, is if you look here, less than 1 year, we're only 2% above. But 1 to 3 years, right, which is when our big growth period was, we have 20% of our folks have been here 1 to 3 years, whereas 11 or 12 is the average among other churches, Catholic and all churches. And then also 3 to 5, we have 17 versus 11. So that's a significant difference. And then the other big difference is 10 years or more, which you almost have to be here at the very start. We only have 30% versus 49 to 48. So this shows we are a much younger parish, and I think that's probably what drives some of the results we see on the engagement page at 1 through 12. And also some of the outcomes maybe. But the neat thing is, recognize that this is our first survey, so this is how we looked at a point in time, and it's all interesting data, but the really exciting stuff will be in 2 years when we do our next ME25, because then we can look at, hey, here's where we were 2 years ago, what trends, how are things moving, up, down, staying the same, and especially we're going to pick a couple things with your help to work on, so we'll be able to look when we do this in 2 years and say, hey, is it working? Is what we're doing working? And if it is, we might say, well, that's pretty good. Let's pick 2 more things to work on. Or maybe we say, it's gone up a little bit. We want to keep working on it. So in 2 years, we'll figure that out, you know. Or one might have increased a lot, and the other one's not coming along as much. So we might pick one new one and keep working on the other. So that's kind of the long-term vision of how the ME25 will be implemented. So now let's go to page 1. So that's a summary of all our results. And you might wonder why I didn't start there, but I think it helps to kind of see the results, and then you can better understand this summary. You'll see as we go through it, I think. The one thing, before you get too depressed, that I want to point out is that these numbers here, you'll see on the top of your page, it says Gallup's 75th percentile. So everything else we're looking at averages, which would be like a 50th percentile kind of thing. Excuse me, but here this is 75th percentile. And why they do that is, like the next time we do this, I mean, that's kind of a goal. If you can get your parish up to the 75th percentile or above, that means you've got a pretty highly performing organization there. And the neat thing is, if you look at the very top, which I don't have on the screen, but you can see for engagement, we're at 3.55. The 75th percentile is 3.85, so we're 0.3 away. Spiritual commitment, the 75th percentile is 4.27, and we're at 4.20. So we're only like 0.07 away. So our parish is much more spiritually committed than most other parishes that would have an engagement level of our level. I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but yeah, it's a good thing, and it's something that I think we can be proud of, but we can certainly keep working on that too. So for these bottom two triangles, a little secret that helps you understand this more. First I'll start with this. This is how Gallup sees people becoming, strongly, actively engaged in a church. The first thing when they come is, oh, you don't have the very bottom, I didn't get the very bottom on the screen, but is what do I get, right? That's what they want to know. And then they go, okay, what do I need to give in return for that? And then the next question is, do I belong? And then once you got them actively engaged, then they're like, how can we grow? Notice the change I, and then we, right? So now they're thinking about the church as a whole and trying to make the church better and help it grow. And so these actually correspond with, thank you for going over. What do I get, which is down here, is the first two questions if you look on the engagement page. So I know what's expected of me and my spiritual needs are met. So what do I give is the next four questions, so E3 through 6 on the next page, or the next block up on the pyramid. And then E7 through 10 are the do I belong, and then 11 and 12 are how can we grow. So what you see down here is the average of those questions, so the 2, the 4, the 4, and the 2 questions. And if you look up here, so if the bottom was showing, you'd see it says 34 and 42, so they average 35 and 34, and they get 34, and they average 42 and 42, get 42. Same thing here, if you average these four, you'll get the 27. Average here, and you'll get the 37. So that's how those numbers correlate and how they derive them.